in the combo classroom for another afternoon live stream of a little series we've been doing every few live streams here where we dive into a list of the strangest Wikipedia articles. It's actually a subcategory that turns out to be on Wikipedia. They say it's not an article, it's a page because it's more subjective, but a list of what have been considered by somewhat a democratic process of people's selections and various editors looking at it and various attempts at edits that these editors see. These have been deemed the most unusual Wikipedia articles, and there were so many funny, interesting ones that I realized pretty quickly on that it was going to have to be multiple streams where we looked at little subcategories of this list here. And today, I decided that history made sense, where we have several subcategories based on first pre-modern, early modern, and then different centuries. And the reason I picked history today is partially because I almost was going to do the food section, like one commenter said would be fun, but I think it would be extra fun if when I do the food section that I have one of those foods. So I'm going to look through the food list a bit more in advance to see if I can get my hands on any of those foods to try during the stream. Now, as far as history, I only skimmed the titles of these, not even the synopses right here, and many of these are concepts that I hadn't known about yet. And we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but we will skim through the most interesting looking ones, particularly one that's the other main reason I decided to do history today was there's one article on here when I was skimming through the titles that I have met before that because of a personal connection to my life, I think is one of the funniest articles of all time. Now, here, jumping into this, let me also just first note, thank you all for joining me. If you do want some more mathematical content, there are some bonus videos and bonus shorts on this channel that have come out recently and more that will be coming out in the next few days. Today, for our live stream, just to jump right into some of these, let's start with some pre-modern history. And I guess let's first start with a note of what we might expect to see here. I believe that what's interesting about the things here, apart from that they were deemed unusual in some way, is that they're sort of mid-scale unusual. They are mid-level of how high the stakes are, you could say, in terms of if something was unusual but in such a global way. For example, certain wars have been unusual, certain famines have been unusual, many darker or more pleasant aspects of history are known in history textbooks and wouldn't have been put on the unusual articles list just because they're well known enough. So if something had a massive impact in history, we won't see it here because they expect you may have already heard about it in a typical textbook, and that its article on its own would come up on many Google searches, unlike these perhaps. But if something was too small stakes, it wouldn't make it on here either because it wouldn't be interesting enough. And so these are medium scale events and things. And we'll see some events as well as some people, and the people are presumably connected to important aspects of history. So we'll look at some of those, but more so we will be targeting the strange events that we meet along this line. And although we won't be clicking on all of them, we might as well click the first just to get a taste of what is an article that's a bit strange going to contain. This one apparently, because the synopses do help before we jump into these, was a masquerade ball in which the king and some noble dancers dress in wild man costumes and accidentally get set on fire by the king's drunk brother. Don't worry, I wasn't the king's drunk brother in this story. I'm not the one who set them on fire. Anyway, this ball apparently resulted in somebody accidentally being set on fire. Now, while that's interesting, I think there's even more interesting ones on this list. And why don't we take a peek just for the interesting title aspect of this, because the synopsis is quite vague. at what a burned house horizon is. Now, as usual, when we're doing this, I will be skimming along these, and some of them may only get a brief mention from me. So if you see any that you think the name or synopsis sounds really cool and you want me to go deeper into that article, feel free to leave a comment. And also feel free to leave any questions or thoughts in the comments. Here we have the burned house horizon. And this is in archaeology, is the phenomena of presumably intentionally burned settlements in a particular realm of the map. Now, apparently there was a widespread and long-lasting tradition in parts of Europe that involved in intentionally burning houses. It says there's debate about why. But the evidence shows it's really unlikely that it was unintentional. So, perhaps this was something dark, like people burning their enemies' houses. Perhaps this was some strange tradition. Maybe if a house got broken enough, instead of building a new one, they would sacrifice it. So, for whatever reason that is somewhat unknown, there was a burned house horizon. So, and hello to everyone commenting. Great to have you all here. And let's go forward a little bit and note a deceased, which they're being a little light with their words. I'm not going to be one of those YouTubers who censors simple words like dead. So we got a dead pope, was exhumed and put on trial. So this dead pope had to go to court. How's that gonna help? Seems like it must have been for symbolic reasons, because how did they expect to get a confession out of that? It was during a period of political instability, they note. So, in any case, moving from there, we have a minority group that was persecuted for reasons that nobody knows why. That's kind of sad. Now, this one seems kind of interesting. They call it the progenitor, or like the one that came before and led to the 1-star Yelp review. Now, you know the website Yelp, where for any aliens watching this, I hope you don't know Yelp, not worth going into. It's an annoying website and company that for businesses is not the best model, because looking at ratings of certain things sometimes draws out, such as like a business, draws out comments from a vocal minority who really hated it, in that you're more likely to leave a review about something you didn't like. I mean, I don't leave reviews on things, so if you are a person who leaves reviews, though, it seems you're more likely to leave a review after getting a really bad experience than you are after getting a really good experience, or same for mildly bad and mildly good. So a lot of businesses are haunted by 1 or 2 1-star reviews from some whiny customer who may or may not have been right, and those seem to drown out many good reviews. Or maybe the people aren't leaving good reviews when they're satisfied with their service. And so apparently the progenitor of that 1-star Yelp review was a complaint tablet to someone named Ea Nasir. As usual, I'll try and pronounce the names, not going to pronounce all the names right. Anyway, this was a clay tablet sent to the ancient city-state Ur, written about 1750 BCE. So that was almost 4,000 years ago. And this tablet documents a transaction in which Ea Nasir, the trader, sold substandard copper to a customer named Nani. Nani, dissatisfied with the quality, wrote this whole complaint on this slab of clay, addressing the poor service and mistreatment. Oh, of the servant. So perhaps this was more like after the trader ripped this guy off, he was like, oh, you want to rip me off? I'm going to expose the way you treat your servant, and wrote up this clay tablet. So this is also the progenitor of the modern beef between people. And here it's noted that It's often considered the oldest customer complaint. And it gained some popularity briefly as an internet meme because of its modern sounding nature. It's funny sometimes when you see things from the distant past that were written in a completely different society with a completely different style of talking, style of language. Not only that you have to translate it, but just the way they convey points is a bit different. Even with that, sometimes you get a lot of modern seeming things, and those can be kind of funny to remind ourselves that we are just evolved apes like whoever wrote this complaint. Now here, we have the criterion of embarrassment, and I forget why, but this did come up in a previous stream, but just to refresh our memory, it is a type of biblical historical analysis in which people claim this has to be true because it would have been really embarrassing for the author. It implies embarrassing things about the author, so who would have done that to themselves if it wasn't true? Which is, a bit shaky to be a proof of something, particularly when it's used in certain ways like this, like people saying, why would the early church have made things such as these things? We won't go into that too much, but there is the criterion of embarrassment. Great title for something. Now we have a disputed possible first female monarch of Chinese history. And we have a Syrian teenage sun cultist, polygamist, possibly transgender Roman emperor. That sentence has only been written here. I don't think that sentence has occurred before. Now, sounds cool though. Seems like a fun person to hang out with maybe. Now we got the Erfurt latrine disaster. And a latrine is something that you go to the bathroom in. And apparently here, the combined weight of the assembled nobles, polite way of saying the people in charge were pretty fat and it broke. And the wooden second-story floor collapsed and many of the attendants fell into the toilet, where about 60 of them drowned. Oh, wow, that has got to be one of the worst ways to die. Oh, man. That is a really big toilet chamber. Okay. Here we have the RIP to all those people. All right. And here we have the House of Corleone. And this is a noble family whose coat of arms includes 3 pairs of testicles. Here we have John the Posthumous, the King of France, from the moment he was born to the minute he died, total of 5 days. Very sad seems to be an infant death, which did occur much more in the past when there weren't as good of hospitals or doctors. The youngest person to be King of France, and the only one to be King of France for his entire life. So, at least went down in history. Kotabos, the world's first drinking game. Care to play? All you need is a bronze lampstand with a tiny statuette on top and some wine. How does the game work? You fling wine lees, which are sediment, at a target in the middle of the room. The winner receives a prize comprising of cakes, sweetmeats, and kisses. Dexterity was required. Similar to people who are good at throwing the javelin. Okay, we have the Maelbrigte of Moray. This is a nobleman who somehow bit a man to death after he had been already dead for a long time. That's strange. So, someone killed him, and okay, so let's go. We have to go to the beginning to understand any of this. So he was challenged to a duel, And the other guy cheated and brought a whole squad of 80 men. And he knew that he had been betrayed, the guy who this article is about, because he saw that each of the other guy's horses had 2 men's legs on its flanks. I guess that's just a way of describing that the whole squad came on horses. Then let's see, there was a big fight. He was defeated and killed. The other guy strapped his enemies' heads to his saddles of his horses as trophies, but then he was riding home, and the head of this guy, his bucktooth, scratched his leg. The leg became inflamed and infected, and as a result, he died. Oh yeah, this guy got revenge. That's what I call revenge. Okay, here we got the Nika riots. Kind of like football hooliganism, except for chariot racing. And also, if it resulted in tens of thousands dead, half of Constantinople being burnt to the ground, and the emperor nearly being lynched. Some of the most violent riots in Constantinople's history. Half of the city was burned. Okay, here we have Onfim. This person was a primary source for what it was like to live in medieval times based on his homework tablets and doodles of himself as a wild beast. That's one of the doodles, I guess, transcribed. So, we got the Phantom Time Theory conspiracy, and that one seems interesting enough to jump in. The time conspiracy is a pseudo-historical. See, we often mention pseudoscience, which comes up if people deny things like the globe being round or revolving around the sun or things like that are considered pseudoscience. But this is now pseudo-history in a similar way. It is a conspiracy that the Middle Ages never occurred and that currently we are 297 years earlier than everyone says we are. That all of the rest of timekeeping has been apparently pretty accurate, but that there was about almost 300 years that didn't actually happen, and that we're actually living in 1727 right now. Don't know if I believe that one. Now we got Pope Benedict the Ninth. Became Pope at 20 and sold the papacy, which is like being Pope. I didn't know you could sell being Pope. And he was Pope 3 times? This guy was a hustler. This guy, the only person to have been Pope, and for people who don't know, the Pope is an important figure related to Catholic beliefs, but also just a very important political figure of sorts. But it is a title that one person is given at a time. And so this is the only person he was the youngest Pope, the only person to have been Pope more than once, and the only person accused of selling being the Pope. You just sold some? You want to buy? Here, I don't want to be the Pope anymore. Give me $500,000 and you can be the Pope. So, something like that. I don't know. He sold being the Pope, somehow made it 3 times being the Pope. So, like I said, what a hustler. Here we got some pre-Columbian transoceanic contact theories. And this is saying that there were many visits. These are speculative theories. These are not necessarily conspiracy theories like the last one. They are more of speculative theories that we shouldn't assume happened or shouldn't assume have been proven, but that could have. That are wondering whether the Americas, North and South America, had major visits to them before Christopher Columbus's major visit. So, some scientists think that they're quite possible. Some scientists think they're not. So, looks like it's still a debated topic. Now we got oh, go away. There. This one says if you're going to say you'd trade your life for your sick emperors, make sure he doesn't get better. This one is a short article. Someone who vowed to sacrifice their own life if the emperor recovered, expecting to be rewarded for his devotion. But when the emperor got well and he didn't want to fulfill his vow, the emperor had him dressed as a sacrificial victim, paraded through the streets, and then hurled down from the eminence by the Colleen Gate. That last sentence sounds a little ambiguous if he was killed by that, or if this was just all a form of embarrassment. But anyway, maybe don't make promises you don't want to fulfill. Here we have Roland the Farter. And this was a guy who was a medieval flatulist. And I didn't know a flatulist was even a word, let alone had an article, but this is a professional farter. And this maybe was the OG, original, professional farter. Now, here we have the Sacred Band of Thebes, an elite fighting force consisting of a hand-picked group of 150 pairs of male lovers. And this was a whole army. Any form of army will be scary. Now, here we have sanitation of the Indus Valley civilization, the home of the first flush toilet. So this is actually where toilets that flushed originated. Here we have the Sino-Roman relations, and these are empires that inched progressively closer to each other over the course of the Roman expansion into the ancient Near East and the simultaneous Han-Chinese military incursions into Central Asia. Mutual awareness remained low and firm knowledge about each other was limited. So, this was an ancient trading relationship of some sort. And now we are on to early modern history, category 2 of 5 here. Early modern history seems like we will be going from where that one left off. And I hadn't really been thinking about it, but I wonder if these are in order. Or, no, I think within these, they are alphabetical. Sometimes alphabetical by last name or something like that. So, but yeah, it's interesting that, like, this one goes by the person's last name, but when it's Pope Benedict, they don't go by Benedict, they go by Pope. But it's alphabetized in a way. And within the categories, this is going to be the next category up until before the 19th century, because that's the next category. Now, remember, centuries are weird. When you say the 19th century, you mean the 100 years leading up to 1900. And so really early modern's going up to 1800 if next is 19th century. So here we have the affair of the sausages, a religious dispute on whether sausages could be eaten during Lent, which is a Christian observance where you aren't allowed to do many pleasurable things. And it's a dispute on whether you could eat sausages during that or not. And it has been defended in sermons that you are allowed to eat sausages during Lent, but apparently highly disagreed upon. Traditions are funny. Here we have architecture terrible. It looks, I thought it was going to be a foreign thing. Maybe it's just architecture terrible. But it's from a French architect. It's an architectural style advocated by an architect. He promoted the style for the exterior design of prisons. The form of the building itself would proclaim its function and serve as a deterrent. So he wanted to make prisons look really ugly and scary on the outside, so you didn't want to go to them. So, I don't know if I go with that idea. Anyway, moving forward, we have a king who was so severely inbred he could barely rule his nation, and witchcraft was suspected at the time, but it was actually due to inbreeding. Here we have Curonian colonization. And this is a little-known colonial empire consisting of bits of land along the Gambia River and the island of Tobago. And like I said, I'm sort of skimming through a bunch of these, just doing the synopsis and such. Leave a comment if you think I skipped one you want to see, but otherwise I'm just going to be clicking the ones that seem to be the strangest ones that I personally may have put on a list of unusual articles. Such as these ones. This is the string of ones in a row I used in the thumbnail image here because skimming through them, I was like, this sounds like a lot of weird ones in a row. We got the dancing plague of 1518. And in 1518, apparently about 400 people started dancing for days without stopping. And over about 1 month, many died from dancing. Now, that's when you know something weirder than just a trend is going on. Weirder than just, oh, we're doing the funny dancing thing. They kept dancing till they died. So, why did this happen? There are many theories, apparently. The most popular being stress-induced mass hysteria. Other theories include ergot, which is a fungus that... So, an interesting thing about this one is some historians, I don't know the legitimacy of this claim, maybe I'll look into it later, but some historians believe that ergot was responsible for many things throughout history where people went crazy acting, such as possibly the Salem witch trials, I've heard it correlated with, that people started trying to drown their neighbors and accuse them of witchcraft because they were seeing hallucinations and stuff and going crazy. There's also religious explanations, and there's controversy concerning how many people died from the dancing thing. That's interesting. I would have to guess that it's some weird mix of something they had been eating or some germ they had or something mixed with, I don't know, some strange form of peer pressure. Everyone's dancing. I got to keep dancing. That one's a strange case from history that who knows if we'll ever uncover the exact reasons. Until the next dancing plague. So, those who don't read unusual articles about history are doomed to repeat them. Here we have the Darien Scheme. This was an attempt to colonize an inhospitable gap. It is a geographic region with a large watershed, dense rainforest, and mountains, and very remote. The failure of the colony ruined the Scottish economy. So, this was a bad idea. They tried to colonize a really hard-to-live-in place. Now we have the defenestrations of Prague. And defenestration on its own is a quite interesting word. When you first hear that, if you don't know what it is, you're like, defenestrate? What exactly would that mean? And it's weirdly specific. Defenestrate is to throw someone out a window, or that being used as a metaphor for removing or dismissing someone from a position of power or authority. So it's a very specific word, to throw someone out a window. And it probably wouldn't have had a word if it wasn't for the defenestrations of Prague, I'm guessing. This was when several people were thrown out of windows. You know, could still be happening. You never know. Don't get defenestrated. Watch your back. So, here we got Timothy Dexter. Was he a genius businessman or was he a loony? Dexter... self-style. He called himself Lord Timothy Dexter. But the fact that they put self-styled right here sounds kind of like a roast, because usually you see also known as right here. This is implying other people did not call him Lord. So, he was an American businessman noted for his eccentric behavior and writings. He became wealthy through marriage and a series of improbably successful investments and spent the fortune lavishly. He wrote a book that was notorious for its unusual misspellings and grammatical errors. Was this just a really lucky guy? So, his writing was like this. I'm the first lord in the United States of America. Now of Newburyport, it is the voice of the people, and I can't help it, and so let it go. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to buy that book. He initially distributed it for free and it became popular, maybe as a mockery of this guy. He responded to complaints about the book's lack of punctuation. Oh my god, this is so good. I remember hearing this story separately. I didn't know it was this guy. This guy is actually really funny. So he responded to complaints that he didn't use enough punctuation in the book by printing an extra page that was just 11 lines of punctuation and the instruction that printers and readers could insert them wherever needed. That's great. Okay. Many of his contemporaries thought he was very dumb. I think he was just a really lucky guy. So, this next one is the article that I had already seen because it comically relates to my life in that, so, I go by Demotro. However, my birth name and something that many of my friends and stuff call me is Dimitri. Basically Demotro, but instead of the O's, it's I's. Now, there's many ways to spell Dimitri, including like this, in this article about false Dimitri. And when I showed this to one of my good friends, we were just dying laughing reading it because it's like the type of joke that I would make. Like, oh, there's also this dynasty of false Dimitris. So, and I'm real Dimitri, by the way. I'm not false Dimitri number 5. Anyway, false Dimitri refers to various imposters who pretended to be this one. Okay, that was the real Dimitri in this particular context. This is real Dimitri. And it's already funny how they name people. The youngest son of the Russian guy, Ivan the Terrible, who wants to be a ruler known as Ivan the Terrible. So, his youngest son was this guy Dmitri, who I believe died pretty young. Let's see. Yeah, he died really young, when he was like 9. However, a lot of imposters pretended to be him to have power. And here's the whole saga. Well, this is the line that's just so comical to me. That like straight out of a cartoon. Each of these imposters claimed to have miraculously escaped the assassination attempt that had claimed Dmitri, and in the cases of number 2 and 3, to have escaped the assassination that targeted number 1 and 2. Each one has like more assassinations they have to claim to have escaped, because whenever each of these ones died, someone new came and said, no, that's me. I didn't die. I'm still here. And so by the 4th one, they have to be like, oh yeah, I've survived 3 miraculous times. So False Dimitri 1 actually became a ruler. False Dimitri 2 then came and pretended to be the same one who had survived this death and then survived this death. Then there's False Dimitri 3, and then there might be False Dimitri 4. Some argue that False Dimitri 4 is just False Dimitri 3 due to bad record keeping. Okay. For some reason, that one was really funny to me because it's like the type of joke I would have made of like, oh yeah, there's a whole dynasty of false Dimitris that escaped this series of assassination attempts. So, false Demotro. I'm watching you. If any false Demotros come out, I'm ready. Okay, so glass delusion is next, and that is believing oneself to be made of glass. Apparently, it was quite popular. So the glass delusion was a psychiatric disorder that was recorded in a particular period during Europe, or in Europe. People feared they were made of glass and therefore likely to shatter into pieces. So glass became a valuable commodity around this time. It was regarded as like a magical alchemical object. Like once you could form glass out of sand can be used to make into glass. It's like, whoa, you made this thing you can see through and it can hold things until it drops hard enough and then it breaks into all these little pieces. And you guys know that I've had some fun witnessing shattered glass around the classroom at times. We do have several shattered clocks around here. And here, a lot of people became scared that they were going to shatter. So, we're not made of glass. We are made of meat, among other things. Not meat to eat, but you know what I mean. Now, we got Gilles de Rais, friend of Joan of Arc and convicted serial killer. We also have Loveday. Can holding hands and going to church end a civil war? Turns out no. So this was a ritualistic reconciliation between warring factions of the English nobility that took place in 1458. Now, I'm kind of skimming these, waiting for the next one that super catches my eye. And let's see what's up with the Macassan contact with Australia. Over a century before Europeans made contact with Australia, which is a separate continent, remember, basically a really big island, Makassarese people from Sulawesi, I'm sure I'm pronouncing these wrong, seeking sea cucumbers traded with the Aboriginal Australians of Kimberley and Arnhem Land, bringing Islamic and Indonesian influence to the local culture, art, language, and lifestyle. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Now we have the miracle of 1511, when the people of Brussels protested against their rulers by building satirical and pornographic snowmen. Don't know if I should click on the article. Don't want my stream to get in trouble, but we get the points. They were building satirical and pornographic snowmen. Now we have Mutiny on the Bounty. We got a true story starting with a stern captain and a lustful crew. This sounds like a book, so that's probably why they clarified true story. And a lustful crew on a Royal Navy ship. And ending with the British Polynesian Seventh-day Adventist culture of the Pitcairn Islands. These are like sentences designed to trip you up with all the things to pronounce. Plenty of drama in between. All right. We got the Order of the Pug. This was a fraternal order, which means a frat. That frats actually go way back in history, but they were still frats. That existed for Roman Catholics in Bavaria in the 18th century. By pug, do they mean like the type of dog? I don't know. Let's see. George Psalmanazar. This was a Frenchman who was so successful at convincing 18th century Britain that he was Taiwanese that he wrote an elaborate and blatantly fictitious history of the island. That's interesting. So he claimed to be the first native of Formosa, today known as Taiwan, to visit Europe. For many years, he convinced many in Britain, but he was eventually revealed to be from Europe. He wrote histories about Taiwan, and I don't know if he even went there, ever. Career as an imposter is a whole section. Okay. Now we have the Crown Prince Sado. To prevent him from becoming the new monarch of Joseon... Oh, squirrel. Squirrel alert. Oh, he has a nut right there. You see the squirrel eating its nut? Oh, it's taking it to go. All right. Here we got Crown Prince Sado. To prevent him from becoming the new monarch of Joseon, Korea. His father, the king, locked him in a rice chest for 8 days and he died from dehydration. That's pretty dark. And the last of our early modern ones is Yasuke, an African man who ended up becoming a retainer for Oda Nobunaga, one of Japan's most important feudal lords. Cool. And now, we are in the 19th century. I need to run in very quickly to the bathroom. I will be back very shortly. But for the next maybe 2 minutes, take a peek at this list and let me know if you have any requests to dive deeper into any of these or these of this section and these next sections. And I will be back shortly. Also, feel free to leave any thoughts and comments. And if anyone does leave early, make sure you have been checking out the bonus videos and shorts I've been dropping recently here as well. Okay, folks, we are back. Thank you to everyone for sticking around. A little sip of coffee, and we're going to jump into some 19th history, strange history. And we do have a request to see the vast maze that this Duke of Portland built, which that does sound quite cool. We'll look at that one. So, also somebody asked some random questions. Someone said, I don't get why Wikipedia has dark mode now. Light mode is the OG. I'll be honest, I get used to when things have a dark mode or light mode, I get used to either, and when I'm using one, I don't want to switch to the other type, so whatever I've been using of those, it's annoying to switch, but then I'd get used to that. So I probably would be fine with dark mode, but I'm also fine with light mode, and I'm used to this. So, here, somebody said I should put my bio to perhaps. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. If you mean I say perhaps a lot, or if you mean perhaps this is whatever my bio says, but we'll consider it. And somebody asked the main page this list is on, which is if you just search on Google unusual articles Wikipedia, you will see the Wikipedia page for unusual articles. I suppose to make sure it's clear, I will drag the URL down. There's the URL. So here, there's many sections. As a reminder, different days that we end up coming back to this will be about places and infrastructure, history, mathematics and numbers we're saving for last, language, science. We did already technology, inventions, and products. And there's a lot more. There's pop culture, food, sports, folklore, society, religion, military, and more. So, there's a lot of gems on this article, or on this page. First of the 19th century, we have the Watermelon Riot. The Watermelon Riot was a deadly riot that unfolded over a stolen slice of watermelon. So here we have Andrew Johnson's drunk vice presidential inaugural address. So it looks like Andrew Johnson, after becoming president, was a bit too drunk when he started his inauguration. So here we have the Emperor of Japan in his own mind. He rose to a celebrity status with his grandiose delusions and theatrical antics. And he believed himself to be the Emperor of Japan. Unfortunately, the actual emperor ended up involuntarily hospitalizing him in a psychiatric asylum. And he tried to escape a few times, but got caught. So, here we got John Bentinck, the 5th Duke of Portland, who apparently built a vast maze under his home. Now, I'm a big fan of mazes. I used to draw mazes on graph paper using lines on the edges. I would even draw mazes I would print and give to kids in my class at school to do. And the teacher wasn't the biggest fan of that because it would distract the students. But I like mazes. They're fun to design. In fact, I've been designing puzzles the past few days. I was inspired to try and create a mix of two of my favorite types of puzzles. Knight and Knave puzzles, which we'll get an episode soon. If you don't know about them, they will get an episode in grade 3. And grid puzzles, like the more commonly known Sudoku and one of my favorites, Star Battle. And I was inspired to try and create a combination puzzle that had aspects of both. So I've been working on that, and it also makes me think of mazes, because a lot of the grid puzzles have maze-like aspects to them. Like, where do I turn here? Where do I turn here? We even saw a mention of mazes and some what I would consider mazes in the last live stream when we were looking at strange graphs. And I was like, some of these look maze-like. In addition, some of the books I'm writing have a maze-like structure. Chapters loop back around to each other in a bit of a maze. Imagine sort of a choose-your-own-adventure, but you're not really picking the plot. You're looking at different aspects of things that occurred, and there's not really an end. You loop around until you visited everything, or maybe some things will feel more like an end. And so I've worked on how to encode maze-like aspects of a choose-your-own-adventure structure as well. Mazes in general I am a big fan of, and my dreams include maze-like places. Really weird maze-like places. So let's check out this dude's maze. So, he was most known for his eccentric behavior, although he was an army officer. And he lived in seclusion and had an elaborate underground maze excavated under his estate. So he owned a big property and he dug out a bunch of stuff at the bottom, like a massive basement-y zone, and made a maze. That's pretty cool. I wonder if it was a 3D maze, if there was like floors, like up and down ladders or stuff. So let's see, do they have any more information or pictures about this maze? So these are just some notes about his introversion and strange behaviors. He ventured outside mainly by night when he was preceded by a lady servant carrying a lantern 40 yards ahead of him. If he did walk out by day, he wore 2 overcoats, an extremely tall hat, an extremely high collar, and carried a very large umbrella, behind which he tried to hide if someone addressed him. Okay, so I'm closer to introverted than extroverted, probably, although it's maybe a spectrum. But this is very introverted to hide behind an umbrella anytime you go out in the daytime. So careful if you get rich what you do with your abilities and power to kind of choose what you do, because, don't fall into this guy's behavior. Apart from maze making, if you're rich, do make a really big maze. That part, copy. So, he may have had kids. There's not even evidence of whether he had kids fully or not. And da-da-da-da. Where's the maze? Show me the maze. Okay, we'll search maze and see what parts of the article they talk about that in. What? That's the only time they say maze is in the summary up there? That is a ripoff. They're just baiting me. So, okay, we're going to try looking it up. We're going to look 5th Duke of Portland's maze. Is that part of the maze? Maybe it's a secret maze. Maybe you got to be in with the right crowds to even know what the maze looks like. Here they say a vast labyrinth of subterranean tunnels and secret chambers, all painted pink. Okay, here they have some more info. It's not the greatest source, tumblr.com. However, we'll see, it's an interesting story, regardless of it's true, although I hope the source is accurate. So it says that it was 15 miles in length, all of the passages in it. The tunnels connected a number of chambers and above ground rooms. So if you were above ground, you might have like a secret way to get down. Now, I gotta say, if I ever had a ton of money, I would have a secret door or two in whatever house I was in. I don't care about a big house as much. I like being outdoors more. But, so I would rather have a big garden than a big house. But I would need a house big enough that I can have at least one bookshelf that's not actually a bookshelf, or is also at least a secret rotating door you can go through, where you pull the right book, like in a cartoon or something. If I was rich, I would have one of those for sure. I don't know if I would have this big of a maze, but I don't know. I would want to have a labyrinth above ground, but maybe both. That'd be really cool if your garden had a labyrinth that also went to a tunnel system at certain points. So, some were really big, some were really elaborate, and apparently they were all painted pink. Included among the chambers was a 160-foot tall hall. So he dug really deep. Whoa. So, that's what to do with your 22 acres. Anyway, back to our main story, because I couldn't find any pictures of the maze, but sounds pretty cool. There are the Confederados, a small group of white Brazilians with roots in the southern United States. And we have drapetomania, a proposed mental illness that was supposedly, according to this guy, the cause of why enslaved Africans would flee captivity. Now, that is a really racist belief, because I think the reason why a slave would escape captivity is not a mental illness, it's because they don't want to be a slave. Okay, so let's not believe in this. Now we got the Dublin whiskey fire. In 1875, a whiskey brewery warehouse in Dublin caught on fire. And it led to the deaths of 13 people, not from the fire, but from alcohol poisoning as they drank free, undiluted whiskey from the streets. So the fire wasn't actually what caused any deaths. It was people trying to drink free whiskey on the street, but it hadn't been diluted yet. Here we got Johann Georg August Galetti, the early master of the bizarre turn of phrase, apparently. He was a historian and geographer. Let's see. He had good phrases, apparently, which these are apparently known as teachers' howlers. And some of them are, after the battle, you could see horses with 3, 4, or even more legs shot off running loose all over the countryside. This guy was his father's son. Da-da-da-da. Apparently, these were really funny back in the day. Let's see if there are any of them that I find funny that I get. I don't think I get the humor yet. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting style of humor back in the day, but this guy had some phrases. Next, we got the Great Moon Hoax. Now, the Great Moon Hoax was apparently an article written by a newspaper publication or something, The Sun, that claimed that animals such as unicorns and bat-winged humans were found living on the moon. You can trick people if you have enough power, such as being a newspaper that people trust. You got to be careful when people trust you. Like, I have a lot of viewers who would, I could probably trick with some bad stuff. But don't worry, I maintain my accuracy. I know the aliens are double checking it. But the Great Moon Hoax was when we had 6 articles published about the supposed discovery of life and civilization on the moon. And I guess tricked a lot of people. Next up, we got the Great Stink. A London summer so smelly that there needed to be government action. I think it was their sewage was not, they didn't have a good sewage system. This person was apparently the strangest man to ever assassinate a U.S. president. And the highlight is apparently the self-penned poem from the point of view of a child that he wrote for his execution. This is a poem he wrote before he was executed. Sounds kind of creepy. And why do they say he's so strange? Well, he shot the president, but Garfield, the president, didn't die until 2 months later, infected from the wound. So apparently this guy was pretty weird. Anyway, we got Jerome of Sandy Cove. A man, unable to speak any language known to locals, was discovered on the beaches in 1861 with his legs cut off. He lived for 50 years but remained unidentified. And let's see. That's a strange, spooky story. Wonder what the background from that was. Looks like there are various possible explanations. Going forward, we got the Kentucky meat shower. And they say it's not as sexy as you'd imagine it to be. It was an incident where what appeared to be chunks of red meat fell from the sky in a certain area. There are several explanations, from blood rain, which is a phenomena in which you get reddish rain for some reason, or red-looking raindrops for whatever reason, to things that vultures were ejecting. I would probably guess that one, like a vulture was throwing up because it ate too much of a weird animal or something. But, pretty weird. Next, we have the Knights of the Golden Circle, a secret society of American slave masters that planned to invade lands in Latin America to spread their pro-slavery views. So, these guys suck. All right, we got the London beer flood. 9 people drowned by a flood of over 300,000 gallons of beer. So that's another beer flood. This time people didn't, or the last one was a whiskey flood. This time so much beer came out that people drowned in it. Don't know if that would be a better or worse way to die. Here we got a king of France for 20 minutes. That's got to be the shortest time for someone to be a king of France. Why was it so short? What happened? There was a revolution right after he got in power. All right. Here we have Gregor McGregor. That's his real name, but possibly the only honest thing about him. He was a confidence trickster. He had got investors in something in a fictional territory that he claimed to rule. Hundreds invested their savings in supposed Poyasian, which is fake, government bonds and land certificates, and about 250 tried to move there to find an untouched jungle. And more than half of those who tried that died. So this guy was a scammer who got a lot of people killed with the scam. So, that's a pretty bad scheme. Anyway, we got the New England vampire panic, an outbreak of tuberculosis that made some superstitious New Englanders burn the internal organs of their dead relatives to try and prevent the disease from spreading. They called it a vampire. Well, this was back when we didn't know much about medicine, so when people got sick, they're like, oh, God, I guess it was a vampire. So here we got Nongkwause, a teenager who became an apocalyptic prophetess, ordering the Xhosa to destroy their own crops and livestock, and they did it. So, yeah, don't follow people who are apocalyptic prophets or prophetesses. I didn't know that was a word. Now we got Heinrich Schliemann, a pioneer of archaeology, but not for good reasons. This guy was an influential amateur archaeologist. Let's see why he was influential. He resold a lot of gold dust. Oh, here's the archaeology section. He wrote a book that was a dissertation, and other researchers say he was wrong. So, I don't know, it was related to archaeology and not correct. Here we got William Walker. He was trying to create new slave-holding colonies, and he became president of Nicaragua for a year and inspired Latin America to come together for the first time to get rid of him. Good, they got rid of him, hopefully. So, here we are moving onward. There are two more sections, the 20th century and the 21st century. They don't have any more sections because we cannot see the future. So, here in our 20th century one, well, first let me double check our comments. Thank you all to the notes. Someone said maybe all of his quotes was that it was two kids in a trench coat. That's true. Maybe, you know, if you were to want to trick somebody that you were an adult and you were two kids, the classic maneuver is to stack on top of each other in a trench coat. So, somebody said they heard the shortest war ever was 40 minutes. Yeah, the scary, sad thing is that with nuclear weapons available, someday the shortest war ever may be like 3 minutes. Like someone fires a missile and someone else fires 50 back, and that's the war or something. So let's avoid war. Humans are making bigger and bigger weapons that we don't need in an arms race to have the biggest weapon. But so let's avoid wars. We are all about peace in Combo Class, even when we represent chaos. That it's chaos that doesn't harm others. Now, in the 20th century, the first unusual article is Are There Men on the Moon? An essay written by Winston Churchill about the possibility of alien life. And we have the anti-tobacco movement in Nazi Germany. Somehow Nazi Germany was a pioneer of policies of this kind. And we have Edward Bloch, who was the Jewish doctor that treated Hitler's mother, and the only Jew that was protected by Hitler when Nazi Germany invaded Austria. Yeah, this was a dark time. Some of my family originated from there. My grandfather, one of my grandfathers, like on one side of my family, was a Jew in Germany during the Holocaust who luckily managed to get out. And here we have a businessman, Hugo Boss, the founder of a clothing brand. And why is every single one of these about Nazis? Okay. We got the burning of the Spanish embassy in Guatemala. Because, yeah, Hugo Boss one started going about Nazis again. So, the burning of the Spanish embassy in Guatemala was one of the more tragic episodes. I want the weird ones. I don't want the tragic ones. Come on, whoever's running this page. I know a lot of sad, dark stuff's happened in history. I want the really weird ones. So, like this, chewing gum sales banned in Singapore. So, the sale of chewing gum in Singapore has been illegal since Oh, it's still going on. It's still illegal. Okay. You cannot buy chewing gum in Singapore ever since 1992. Some reasons were not wanting people to put their used gum in places that the city had to clean, such as some people were putting them on subway door sensors or stuff, or elevator buttons. Now, since 2004, you can get a medical exception. So it's sort of like in California, where I live, cannabis or marijuana used to be illegal unless you had a medical card for it. Now it's legal if you're over a certain age, but here you need like a medical card to get gum. Now, it says it's not illegal to chew gum in Singapore, but it's against the law to import or sell it. So that's one of those interesting cases where if you were chewing it, they'd probably just confiscate it, but not give you trouble. But if you had a bunch of gum, they're going to be like, are you selling this gum? What are you doing with 2 packs in your pockets? So now apparently it's legal for a traveler to bring a small amount for personal use. See, they don't want you giving or selling gum. So I approve of there being a fine for spitting the gum out in an inappropriate place. That's fine. You can fine people who just spit gum out as trash. But I don't know about banning it. All right, Singapore. Now we got the Christmas truce, an unofficial armistice in World War I where nations celebrated Christmas and played football, meaning what? Not the type of American football, but football as in what Americans call soccer. So, Christmas truce, sounds nice. There was a war going on, and they're like, okay, it's Christmas, we're just going to play football. All right, that's pretty neat. Now, it goes to show, humans don't actually want to hurt each other in a war. They've done studies and showed that soldiers who have guns from afar and are just like, kill this person from afar, often try and subconsciously miss because nobody wants to do that. They're doing it because it's a weird societal thing, and I don't know. I would certainly never join the army myself. Now, here we have COINTELPRO, the FBI's name for their undercover operation of investigation. This is another not that unusual one. It's more like somewhat important. It's a somewhat important historical thing. And I'll wait to talk about the big important historical things for the ones that I know about or have learned a bunch about at different times in life. Right now, we're just going to go to the weirdest sounding ones. And how about the Crockerland expedition, which was to a non-existent island created to swindle a businessman? That one sounds interesting. So, this was an expedition to investigate the existence of Crockerland, a huge island that was supposedly sighted by the explorer Robert Peary. And it's now believed that Peary lied and made up the island. Now, why did he do this? He apparently wrote in his diary that no land was visible, so he was making it up. Apparently, the invention of it was an attempt to secure further support from someone else. So he tricked people by making up an island. I don't know if you can do that as easy nowadays. Back in the days before Google Maps and stuff, it was like the Wild West. It was crazy. You could just make up an island to hustle someone. So Here we got Czechoslovak Togo. This is a landlocked Eastern European country that was proposed getting a colony in Africa to be administered by its troops in Siberia. Okay. And here we got an incident. Apparently, the collapse of Yugoslavia was begun but with a man going to the emergency room with a bottle up his anus. That's another one that I'm not going to click for the sake of not getting my stream in trouble from any sorts of images, but you can imagine it yourself. Apparently, this kicked off the collapse of Yugoslavia somehow. Now, the East Germany balloon escape was one of the most famous cases of East Germans escaping. The balloon escape, escaping in a homemade hot air balloon, a result of over a year and a half of preparations involving 3 different balloons, various modifications, and an earlier unsuccessful attempt. The failed attempt alerted the authorities to the plot, but the police were unable to identify the escapees before their second successful flight 2 months later. So, they were trying to escape bad times in East Germany, and they made a hot air balloon. That's what we call working with what you got. Now we have Elizabeth, Lady Hope, a woman that became famous for creating a hoax where Charles Darwin renounced his theories of evolution at his final moments. So that's a weird hoax. She made up that, okay, so Darwin, who studied birds and came up with ideas about natural selection that we have now basically verified that most of the things he was hypothesizing are the case. And he was studying the ways that animals evolve over time. And natural selection is sort of that, which he was related to, hypothesizing about the idea that if you had 2 different but similar members of a species, 2 different animals of the same species that had different slight mutations in their genes, so they were slightly different than each other, because mutations occur in genes for reasons like this, then the stronger one will end up surviving, and that will make stronger kids. And so natural selection is one of the main explanations for why over evolution things sort of become more powerful as the evolution progresses. So apparently this person made up that Charles Darwin, before he died, was like, no, actually evolution was fake. So this is sort of a meta version of some of the last ones. The last ones were like people making up some big scale thing. This is someone claiming that Charles Darwin was doing that. So here we have Dorothy Gibson, famous for surviving the Titanic sinking and being an actress and apparently having a quite turbulent life afterwards. And then we have the Great Michigan Pizza Funeral, which sounds funny and interesting. I think funny. It has pizza, sounds like it would be an interesting, unusual article. The funeral part, we'll see how these combine. So it was the ceremonial disposal of over 29,000 frozen cheese and mushroom pizzas. And they were recalled by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, after apparently they had botulism causing bacteria. So yeah, this food might have gotten people sick, and so the FDA is like, you can't sell this, got to get rid of it. And he decided to ceremonially dispose of them to demonstrate accountability and receive publicity. So they were tipped into an 18-foot deep hole while a crowd of onlookers watched. And looks like the governor was around. And later the FDA showed it didn't have botulism. And he was like, look, I dumped all the pizzas in a hole, and he sued the suppliers and won a lot of money. I wonder what happened with that hole, if they just paved over it and left the pizzas down there. So, the Great Molasses Flood. This is a strange flood. It is a disaster that occurred when a giant molasses tank flooded. And not only did it cause 21 deaths and 150 injuries, but it also reportedly for decades made the area smell of molasses when it was a hot day. Oh, that sounds awful, to have your whole neighborhood, whenever it gets hot, smell of some disaster that occurred years before. So next we got the mango cult. What's the mango cult? This was the worship of mangoes in China during a certain period. Now, maybe mangoes were rare there, and they do have a different taste than a lot of typical fruits. So, if you had never had a mango and just had other fruits and tried one, it could seem quite holy. But I don't know if we want to worship just mangoes. In combo class, we worship all the fruits. Fruits are awesome. So mangoes are probably a top 10 fruit, but the top 10 list for me would be so debatable in my head. It would be hard for me to narrow down to just 10 fruits. So here we got mangoes becoming a symbol of Mao's affection. Instead of being eaten, the mangoes were preserved in formaldehyde or sealed in wax. So this kind of sucks. They were treating the mangoes like holy objects by preserving them so the mango lasted a long time, but you can't eat it. Just make a plastic mango if you're going to do this or something and eat the real mango. So I think if you have a mango cult, you should be eating the mangoes during your worship ceremony, not formaldehyding them. Here we got Masabumi Hosono. And let me see with the comments. Somebody said there's a movie about the Christmas truce. Sounds interesting. And somebody said, you can go into a shop and buy smoke in California. Yes, in reference to what I was discussing before, it is true that if you're over 21, there are certain shops allowed to sell cannabis in California. Not any store can do it. They need a special license to be that type of shop. But yes, anyone over 21 can. So, which is the same age for alcohol in all of the United States. I think. At least in California. Then you get a few more people. This is a Japanese survivor of the Titanic. We get someone who was an Argentinian nurse who survived 3 separate maritime disasters, including the Titanic. So that's pretty wild. She survived 3 different ships sinking. So she survived the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, survived the sinking of the sister ship to the Titanic, the Britannic, in 1916. And she was also on board of another related ship, the Olympic, when it collided with another ship. Each time she was like, not again. But that's pretty cool. She's either very lucky or maybe somehow skilled at escaping shipwrecks, whatever that skill consists of. Somebody said unsinkable Violet. Yeah, I think that, was she the one they nicknamed Unsinkable, or is that someone else? We saw a different Unsinkable one before. Unsinkable Sam was the cat who survived 3 sinking ships. So this is basically the human version, like this comment may be noting, of Unsinkable Sam. All right. And then we have another. Okay, they put these all in a row or something, or it's weird because it's by alphabetical order. It's H-J-E-J-O. They're going by last name. And it just happened that all the Nazi ones were clumped and all of the Titanic ones were clumped, even though it's alphabetical. But maybe this is clump theory in action, where clumps will emerge more commonly than evenly distributed things. Like, for example, if you randomized which cells on a chessboard were black or white, it would be far more unlikely to get a checkerboard-like pattern than one that looked like it had a bunch of islands. So maybe that's just what's going on. Clump theory is actually the name of something. Now, let's see what else. Kilroy was here was a very old meme. You may think you need the internet for a meme, but you don't. People would draw this guy and write Kilroy was here. And if it was widespread of people drawing this image with text, that's an original meme, one of the older ones. Here we have a guy who went over Niagara Falls, which is a massive waterfall, in a barrel and survived, attempted to swim the rapids under it and survived, then died after slipping on an orange peel. The only way this could be more cartoonish would be if it was a banana peel. But that does sound interesting. So he went over Niagara Falls in a barrel, and he got injured but didn't die, but had to spend 6 months in the hospital. And he had been a stuntman, so he had experience with the circus. People don't realize, but being a stunt person takes skill. Like, people who are really good at doing stunts. For example, Steve-O from Jackass was in a circus before as part of his life. It takes a certain skill to be able to fall really far and hurt yourself minimally, or get hit by something really hard and hurt yourself minimally, or things like that. So, the stunt people who survive long enough to become well known often have things like circus experience. This person did successfully do it, although someone previously failed in a bad way. And let's see. Then he attempted to swim in the whirlpool. And after surviving all that, while on a publicity tour, probably talking about all this, it sounds like, he slipped on an orange peel, injured his leg. And see, a lot of these weird deaths from back in the day aren't actually people dying right away. There's somebody getting a wound that becomes infected because we didn't have like good antibiotics and stuff. Now, going back one, we have a Chinese man who founded a cult and declared himself Emperor of China. That sounds familiar. There was another person who declared themselves Emperor earlier. Now, this one got a whole cult around him, I guess. If you claim you're the Emperor of somewhere, some people will believe. So, I'm the Emperor of Combo Land. It's an island that exists. Trust me. Now, we have Madagascar Plan, an abandoned Nazi plan to transport all of the Jewish population on Europe to one little island. Oh, what evil people. Now, here we have what happens when a mentally unstable, self-proclaimed Hitlerian Marxist becomes the leader of a nation. That sounds bad. Now, MK Ultra. This one's kind of like COINTELPRO, where there's actually an interesting government thing, and it is unusual historically, but it's big scale enough that maybe we'll look deeper into that in the COINTELPRO if I research them ever, but I don't know if I would classify them as the same type of unusual because they're a little more well known. Here we have Moscow Gold. At the start of the Spanish Civil War, more than 70% of the Bank of Spain's gold reserves were transported to the Soviet Union by the Republican government. The controversy and mystery of where it went continues to echo through Spain. So the Republican government just stole a lot of gold, it sounds like, right there. Typical. All right, here we got, takes a deep breath. He's a baron. Oh no, this is telling me to take a deep breath before I say this. He's a baron, paleontologist, geologist, aristocrat, adventurer, scholar, albinologist, and one-time spy. Among other things, he was the first to postulate that certain dinosaurs got smaller on islands. He was almost the king of Albania, and he named a fossil turtle after his male lover's arse. Interesting sounding guy, a lot of different jobs. Now here we have the North Hollywood shootout in 1997, when Hollywood is an area in California, not very close to where I am, that is where they film a lot of movies and where a lot of like celebrity culture is near. Two heavily armed men were involved in a bank robbery, which turned into a 44-minute shootout with police officers. 20 people were injured as a result, and only the criminals died. That sounds like it worked pretty well. Well, apart from the 20 injuries. I mean, not that I want robbers to die, but apart from the 20 injuries, it worked out better than it could have. Octobering. In a country where Christianity has been banned as counter-revolutionary. What country is that? So, early era of the Soviet Union? But still want to have a christening? No problem. Have an Octobering. So this sounds like a way to do a christening, or related to baptisms, I suppose. I don't know a huge amount about Christian cultures. I mean, I know some interesting details, but I don't know exactly what you do in a christening. But this is a version of that they did to escape the early Soviet Union banning this. So, you know, if you're a government and you ban something, people are just going to give it another name and do it. Now, here we got Kenzo Okuzaki. a World War II, although that's not always true because, like, there are certain weapons that should actually be banned. That's my exception to saying if the government bans things, people will do it anyway, so bans don't really help. My exception is going to be certain weapons. Okay, Kenzo Okuzaki, an Imperial Japanese Army veteran whose determination to hold the Emperor responsible for the hardships of the war resulted in some particularly strange acts involving obscenity, murder, and pachinko balls. Pretty strange. And now we got Operation Paperclip. I'm going to skip the Nazi ones for now. We'll skim by them and read their names. I don't need to, like, read about an unusual aspect of the Holocaust right now. So, Emilio Palma was an Argentine national who was the first person to have been born in Antarctica. That's interesting because Antarctica is massive and not very habitable. It's not a good environment to live in, really. It's, I believe, it's at least incredibly cold. There might be parts or times that are incredibly hot. The days and nights are really weird. Not that many plants grow there, so not that many animals live there. So what do you eat? So this was apparently the first person to have been born in Antarctica. And when was this? 1977? That's really recent. Or he was born in 1978. So yeah, that's pretty recent. That's like less than 50 years ago. The first person ever was born on the continent of Antarctica. They do note the first documented person. There could have been people that had been born in some undocumented ship there that went there with a pregnant person or something. However, you know, if there were others, there weren't many because that's not a place where humans originated, really. Back here, we have the assassination of Olof Palme, the murder of a Swedish prime minister that became quite a mystery. He was fatally wounded while walking back from the theater. Why is it such a mystery? So yeah, they're not sure, I guess, exactly who killed the guy. Now here we have Punjabi Mexican Americans, two groups discriminated against in 1910's California, intermarried, creating a unique dynamic community and a delectable new fusion cuisine. So, this is sort of a merging of different cultures that were both minorities who are being treated poorly, and has whole interesting cuisines and such. Now we got the Puyi. We got Puyi as a person, is the last emperor of China. He became the emperor at 2, and he died as an ordinary citizen, ending 2,133 years of dynastic rule. So he was the last emperor. After him, no more emperors. He also did community theater when he was old. Seems pretty cool. We don't need emperors. Okay, Radcliffe line. What is the real reason, or I'll say one of the real reasons for the many conflicts between India and Pakistan? Well, they gave one man who'd never been there 5 weeks to draw a border. That sounds pretty unusual. So somebody drew a border between these places, a partition, and apparently had never visited there, and apparently only took 5 weeks figuring it out. All right, well, here we have the Rangoon bombing. This is a bad case of violence. And then we have the Reggio Revolt, which is a coalition. It's another armed revolt against a government. So, like I said, these ones, less unusual. Let's get to the most unusual ones. How about the Satan... I named everyone but this so far, so I'll feel bad if I don't name him. Okay, here we got Matthias Rust, and he landed on a bridge. And we got the Satanic Verses controversy. One book causing the death of thousands and put Middle Eastern relations with the West. The author of the book got stabbed. This is from the author Salman Rushdie, who wrote the novel The Satanic Verses. And ended up causing a lot of violence, including against the author of the book. So don't do that. If you don't like a book, then make a little speech about what you think's bad about the book and hope you inspire people to not read it. Don't try and cause violence over a book, and don't even ban a book. If you don't like the book, say, I don't like the book for this reason. Now, the self-propelled barge T-36. Well, we love the number 36, so this is a barge that was 17.3 meters, and a bunch of people got stranded on it for 49 days across the ocean. Oh, whoa. This is the path it took. Oh my god, it landed all the way over here in San Francisco, which is kind of close to where I am. So, here we have, on our main list, an English pickle merchant who became a devout Muslim and was declared king by a group of rebels during the Chinese warlord era. I like how you can just be a pickle merchant back in the... I guess now you could own a pickle shop, but normally, nowadays, people try and be the merchant of so many different things. It's just like, this guy was just good at pickles at first. So, now, I guess you could pickle a lot of different things, not just cucumbers. Here we have Japanese Brazilians who refused to believe Japan had surrendered and continued the cause by killing other Japanese Brazilians. Not a good technique. And we have Stanley Lord, the captain of a ship that could have been the savior of the victims of the Titanic disaster. He was the nearest ship to the Titanic and may have seen it sinking, and they weren't quick at assisting it. So, the most radioactive human ever. Why is he the most radioactive? Well, he was a house painter who was subjected to, oh, this is bad, an involuntary human radiation experiment? How did they get him with an involuntary experiment? So, plutonium was first synthesized in 1940 and isolated in 1941 by chemists at UC Berkeley, which is quite close to me. Early research was carried out on small samples using a cyclotron. Now, normally experiments like this are good. We want to discover what's going on with elements. They give us cool clues about reality in the universe. So we want to synthesize elements and things like that at some point as experiments. However, we don't want to involuntarily expose people to radiation. So why did this guy get so much of it? So this person had started experimenting on people. Experimenting on people is never a good sign, including himself at Berkeley. And they did toxicity studies on plutonium, and he zapped this guy with a lot of radiation, I guess. So this person was the most radioactive, apparently. Now we have a laughter epidemic that was supposedly not very funny. So the laughter epidemic was a time where people couldn't stop laughing. And this is sort of like the dancing epidemic from earlier, where it makes you wonder if the cause was something related to like a fungus or a germ or something, or if it was somehow just like a mass cultural peer pressure like anxiety attack like thing going on. I don't know. But the symptoms lasted up to 16 days, averaging 7 days. Students couldn't focus in school because they were all laughing. People were fainting because they were laughing too much. I wonder if it was like fun at first. Like if you're laughing for like 5 minutes, that might be fun until it keeps going. Now, connected events. There were a few events where people could not stop laughing. That is strange. And here we have a Hungarian Jewish man who was at various times a UK member of Parliament, German World War I spy, a Nazi collaborator, and the self-proclaimed Dalai Lama. A lot of people on these lists that are just have a lot of wacky jobs, including some they completely made up or like wacky titles that they've made up. This is one of the darker experiments of US history. And these are some more ones that are related to wars and governments doing bad things. So while those are interesting, there are perhaps more unusual, we could say, aspects of history based on certain specific standards. And so we're going to jump down to the 21st century because I see cottage cheese boycott on there. And I mean, I wonder two things at first. It catches my eye because I wonder, why was cottage cheese boycotted? And then why was that important enough to get an article? So it was a protest against rising staple food prices in Israel. And cottage cheese, I guess, is commonly consumed there, considered a basic food item. So people said, stop buying it. And I guess it got really expensive. Cottage cheese, among other things. And that was their symbol. Here we have a presidential bid that was ended by a scream, known as the Dean Scream. I don't know if you want your main thing about you on Wikipedia, or one of the main things, to be your name and then scream. But he listed states he would win to a raucous audience before screaming, yeah! And people did not like the way he screamed, yeah. They have the scream here. Let's see. Sounds a little weird, but nothing worth changing whether you support a candidate or not over. But when you're a politician, you can say yeah the wrong way once and you could lose a quarter of your followers. It's weird. So remember, base your things more so on the policies of people than if they say yeah weird. And if you do live in the U.S. like I do, please be, and you're old enough, please be registered to vote. And please vote for the candidate that will be helpful for the world compared to very detrimental for the world. Not going to name names. So, Rudy Deckers, we have the September 11 attacks and how they changed everything for the flying instructor of two of the hijackers. That's bad. You don't want to be the guy who taught people how to fly and then they become terrorists using planes. I don't know if he should be blamed for that or if I just feel really bad for him and he didn't know that was going to happen. Anyway, we also have the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist. This is when thieves stole 3,000 tons of it. Now, remember, a ton is 2,000 pounds. So this was 6 million pounds of maple syrup stolen. That's a lot. Adjusted for inflation, it's the most valuable heist in Canadian history. More than any money stolen, apparently. More than any fancy paintings stolen or whatever. If we adjust for inflation, they stole more maple syrup than has ever been heisted in Canadian history. So, yeah, that's pretty wild. How did they figure out? An inspector started climbing up the barrels and nearly fell, expecting 600-pound barrels, but they were empty. Later, police arrested 17 men related to the theft. The accused ringleader was sentenced to 8 years in prison and got fines and prison time. So, we got Uday Hussein, Saddam Hussein's oldest son, and a real-life villain. Yeah, sounds like a villain. So, sounds like a bad guy. We got the laser kiwi flag, the real New Zealand flag in all of our hearts. And this is a a flag design that was proposed as the New Zealand flag. They totally should have used this as the flag. That's awesome. I totally approve of this being the New Zealand flag, even though I have no say there because I don't live anywhere near there. I recommend this flag. The kiwi is a bird. I have a funny history with kiwis from the past. I'll tell another day when we do stories from my older past. But they are birds, as well as the fruit called a kiwi fruit. And this one's firing lasers. So, kiwi with lasers coming out of its eyes, that's got to be cooler than whatever flag they do have. Is that their actual flag? Boring. Should have this. Okay. We got the Norwegian butter crisis. There's a lot of food crises here. A massive inflation of butter prices caused illegal smuggling and an emergency appeal from a Danish television show. So there was a shortage of butter, so it got super expensive. Don't want a shortage of butter. Butter is something a lot of people are going to buy. Now we got John P. O'Neill. You can make butter, too, if you were desperate, as long as you have some milk. Or I think you could do it with milk. Maybe you need the cream part of milk. But I think with normal milk, you could make something butter-like. Because I know I've done an experiment when I was much younger where you simply shake a jar of cream or heavy cream or whipping cream or something like that. And you shake it, and it turns to butter, basically. So maybe we'll do that during a live stream someday. We'll create butter during the stream. Now here we got a special agent in the FBI who investigated. Wait, what's it saying here? Oh, it's saying that it's having trouble with the internet. Hopefully I don't look glitchy. Hopefully it's looking and sounding okay. Anyway, we have a special agent in the FBI, and he quit. And And here we got, I'm kind of skipping to the food disasters because it's kind of going back and forth, and weird flags. It's going back and forth between like political things and maple syrup heists, butter crisis, Pepsi flood. So here we have the Pepsi fruit juice flood. That's a flood of 176,000 barrels, which they say that's 28,000 cubic meters. So let's imagine that a cubic meter is, like about this amount. So that's a lot. Imagine how many houses that would fill. Of fruit and vegetable juices into the streets of here. And a PepsiCo warehouse's roof collapsed unexpectedly. And, yep, big flood of juice. These warehouses got to be more careful. It seems like stuff keeps leaking. Although, on the big scale, it's only every couple hundred years that we get a massive flood. One large enough to get a list on this article, or a place on the list. Now we have the code name for part of the president's surveillance program. And there's another political one. And that may wrap up the Wikipedia portion of this stream, although I am going to stream a little longer. I'll explain that in a moment. Because although next is math and numbers, I am going to save that for last, because when I skim through this, there's a few of the topics that I have an episode half planned about that will be a more interesting way to be exposed to certain concepts for people who don't know them, compared to just starting here with them on a list. So I'm going to save that for last, and by that time, I may have already made the couple episodes that are related to things on that list. Now, somebody asked if I've heard of the Great Molasses Flood in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Separate, different Great Molasses Flood was... Did we see that here? We saw certain floods. Was this it? Yeah. So, yeah, this one's there. The Great Molasses Flood. And then somebody said there's not enough fat in regular milk. You need cream to make butter. Okay, that's good to know. If we ever do a stream, I'll look it up beforehand so I'm not just shaking a jar of milk for no reason. But thanks for the tip that we need cream to make butter. Now, how exactly do you get cream? Can't you get cream from milk? So we could start with milk, but it would be a 2-stage process. We'd have to make the cream out of that. Don't know about that process either. Maybe someday I'll be so good at it, I'll be a cheese maker. But we'll see. Anyways, all the comments, love you for joining me. Thank you. And what we're going to just do for a minute, I need to run inside just very briefly to get a sip of water. But after that, I'm going to sit here and just chat for a bit and do some puzzles. I was almost going to do a stream just about puzzles, but I just want to, for anyone who wants to hang out a little longer, chat, answer a few things, mention a few things, and some of them will be about puzzles. Some of them maybe also will do more Wikipedia articles, but we may save that for another time. If anyone does head out now, make sure that you also are tuned in to not only the new bonus videos I've been putting on this channel, but also to my combo class channel, where my big grade -2 finale is being worked on to come out. And I'll be back soon. Hope a couple of you stick around, or some random new folks, to chat with some puzzles. And I hope all of you enjoyed the Wikipedia section of today. All right, folks, we are back. And thank you to anyone who stuck around. Somebody said they missed the live. It'll be a sad night. Don't worry. You can rewatch these always. One weird note is that when you rewatch one of the live streams, YouTube takes a while to process both the HD of it and the chat alongside it. So it takes a little while for the chat to show back up. But right after the live streams, you can watch an SD replay of them, and then it becomes HD before long. But we are going to stick around a little longer and chat while I try a puzzle that is a version of one of the puzzles I showed a few streams ago that is one of my favorite mathematical puzzles, which originally I encountered under the name Two Not Touch. And that's because this version of what are more commonly known as star battle puzzles involves having 2 stars per column, row, and enclosed region, such that no 2 stars are direct neighbors, including diagonally. So none can be 1 cell away, including diagonally. Every row, column, and region needs 2 stars. And just with those 2 rules, you get a magical puzzle. But after I looked deeper into it, because I am actually planning an episode about the mathematics behind it, I found that star battle doesn't have to be restricted to 2 stars. 1 star can be interesting, but can be a little more boring in a certain way. 2 star maybe is when it starts to get interesting enough that you'd want at least that many, and so it's a good, starter one. But I've grown to not only like the 2 star ones, but I've studied a lot more about them and seen that there are some that maybe you can't solve with certain basic techniques, and you'd have to do what they call bifurcating in puzzle theory or whatever, where you imagine 2 different paths and their outcomes. But ideally, you can use a strategy to solve them, and I'm trying to develop new strategies that will let us do that to any puzzle. But it's interesting to mathematically phrase how certain strategies work. But in general, when I said 2 stars for each of those, what if we had, and this is good. This shows common shapes of things you could eliminate. If you have this as a region, you know the stars are there. These regions you can at least eliminate. They can't be on those neighbors. They would destroy too much of their neighbors as possibilities. So what I want to try today is a larger amount of stars on one of these puzzles. I've tried these ones just a few times, but I've sort of figured out the link between 2 stars and how it'll work with more stars. What we're going to want to do and how I can sort of transfer what I was using as rules related to 2 and related to other numbers, now using a generalized formula of sorts. Like certain things in my episode will be, if we have n stars, then this happens for n minus 1 blocks in a row, or no, 2n minus 1 blocks in a row, and this happens for 2n plus 1 blocks in a row, or stuff like that. And today we're going to try the star battle, which is, mistyping, which is one of these more common names for this general puzzle. Like here's a 1 star one, and we're going to try on one of the more common websites, the first one that comes up when you search it, which I've found is somewhat bad at determining normal versus hard on the ones they try and rate like that. One of the ones they don't even rate how hard it supposedly is or isn't is a 4-star daily star battle, a 5-star weekly star battle, and a 6-star monthly star battle. Now, I don't know if they've considered the week to have restarted yet. The month almost will, but not quite. But I've already done those ones. And I did the 4-star on the day before, but now there's going to be a new 4-star one I've never done because those are daily. So, this is a 4-star version of that puzzle I showed earlier. And I love the logic behind this. So while we chat about whatever questions or comments you have, a few combo class notes I want to make and such, while we do that, I will be filling this in and explaining it this time. Another time, maybe I'll just put it in the background if we're chatting and do one super quick. But I'm not going to be super quick at the 4-star ones yet, because sometimes I need to think for a second of how I generalize the techniques I know to larger things. But one of the biggest techniques for any size of this is you can only have up to 1 star in a 2x2 square of boxes, whether or not that 2x2 square is in a single region or outside it. And that will help us in many ways, starting with the fact that, I guess the way I'd phrase it is, if you can overlay 2x2, for an n-star puzzle, n is 4 on this one, for an n-star puzzle, if you have a little region, then if you can think of a way mentally, like visually but mentally, overlaying 2x2 squares over the shape such that n 2x2 squares for an n-star puzzle cover a single shape, then you can sort of delete the gaps within those squares that aren't in the shape. For example, this plus this makes this top region something we could describe with 2 2 by 2 squares. It's a little more than we need because they overlap, but we can't do it with one. This right here can be enclosed in a 2 by 2 square, so we can delete the gap in it. We can even delete those gaps. That was one and that was one, and we can delete the gaps. And most importantly here, these two had to be part of their own 2 by 2 square. If we imagine one there, one there, one there, and one there. These were isolated, and when we delete the neighbors of a 2 cell, we can totally eliminate the neighbors of any time we know 2 in a row have 1 star within them. That these neighbors are impossible. I think of it as if there's a star there, it sort of blows up whatever's around it because it makes those not able to be possibilities. So if that was there, it would blow up both of those, and we need something in them. So now we have 1 there, and we could go 1 there. We could sort of rethink of how we're overlaying them. As long as with the new way of laying them, we can still lay 4. 1, 1, 1, 1. So now I know a lot more. Now I know that of these, and in fact, I can even go now further. 1, 1, and 1. So I know there's one on the end. And if I think of it for a moment, we know that that's the only way to fill out that bit because it's sort of reduced to a 2-star puzzle in that section. If I know that that little section has 2 stars, it's like a 2-star puzzle right there. And that shape, you'd get to know, oh, they have to be there. These we can't go further with yet, but they do help us. We know there's 1 within one of those and 1 within one of those. Now we're going to do that to a few more shapes before we go into, there's other techniques we'll need, but right now there are still shapes that are small enough that we haven't done that to, that will give us information by doing that. So like right here, the only way, this one's actually fully known now, this region up here can only fit if it's 1, 2, 3, 4 exactly in these places. You can imagine why any other positions would clog it up too much. Now, that doesn't change anything about this zone yet, so we're going to move zones before we look at things like lines. So in this zone, we could go 1, 2, 3, 4. And since that fit, the whole shape that was left with 4 of them, and it's a 4-star puzzle, I know that had one because that was the only part of the shape in one of the 4. Now I know similarly it has to go 1, 2, 3. Can't be there. And now I can go even further because that helped delete it. We can go 1, 1, and the remaining 2. That has to be there. And now we have it able, oh no, that star, I didn't clear its neighbors yet. So now it has to be that. Okay. So that shape was also fully known. They're not all going to be as easy though. This one, we can get some. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean 4, right there. That's the only other one in the shape. So we get that, and we get the gap of that one. Now we can do an interesting technique here. So we can note that here we have 3 stars in a line, which is almost enough that takes up all the stars of that line. The line will have 4, and we know there's one of these two is, because we went 1, 2, 3, 4. So if one of these two is, that is the 4th. Because it's in the line, both of them. I think of that almost like they're firing a bullet through the line if we have 4. And as long as this is pointing in the line, that we know there's one in there, it makes the bullet work. So right there, we can wipe out the whole line. Because if it's one of those, it has to be the 4th. That gives us a little more in this shape, because now we have 1, 2, 3. It has to be that, has to be that, has to be that. Is the only way to fit those in there now. So now let's do a line technique before we go to another shape, because I just see one right here. I noticed that in this second line from the top, we have 1, 2, and then a 2 gap and a 2 gap. Each 2 gap can only hold 1, so that accounts for all 4. 1 there, 2, 3, 4. And when we have 2 gaps, we can remove their neighbors. So that helps this line. 1, 2, 3, another 2 gap, remove the neighbors, because it had to be the 4th. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, we get that same thing as before. Here we even get 3 in a row of 2 gaps, but since there's 6 here, and we could think of that as 3 2s, 3 pairs, we can only fit 3 in there, and so we know that within here it's 2 section, 2 section, 2 section, and that one, so we get to remove all those neighbors. Now here, can we keep going? 1, 2 gap, 3, 4. That's all that fits. That time we got even more because it was a tiny gap over here. Can we keep going downward? We'll hit a limit soon. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not quite. So this is going to be interesting. Here's what we got to do here. We got 1 and 7 in a row. We don't know exactly where the 2 gaps line up. However, you end up learning that when you have, this is one of the cases of 2n plus 1 for the amount of stars. Oh no, 2n minus 1 in this case for the amount of stars, because that makes 7. We know that it cannot eliminate certain clumps of 3. Some clumps of 3 can be eliminated and still fit 3 stars in there, but some clumps of 3 in a row would leave only 2 clumps that could have stars and couldn't fit all 3. And it turns out we could do that one, which is already there, that one, and that one. It's weird, but if you play around with times where you have in a row 2n minus 1 for how many stars there are, you can eliminate these spots. Now, we can't do our line technique any further. There's too many places it could be on that line. Luckily, this helped carve out a bunch of shapes. Like this shape right now, we know a lot of info about. All it could fit is 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there. So now we're going to look at a few shapes that this may have affected our line technique. This one right here, I'm looking quickly if there's like any way to put 4 boxes over it. Or we even want to look out for, this sounds random, but a time where we can get all of it with boxes apart from one that's slightly bigger than a box, but certain shapes. Sometimes one of them can be a little bigger than a box. We can't use the exact box deduction, but we can sometimes like find a shape that one dot outside it would eliminate all of it, and then we could kind of consider it to have some of the rules boxes do. Anyways, let's just look at some of the smaller shapes, because there are a few easy ones left. 1, 2, 3, not quite 4. This is actually an example of what I was talking about. So I can't do the full box technique where I know there's one in those 2. But since I could fit 1, 2, 3 boxes apart from these 3 in a row, I know I can't eliminate the entire 3 in a row. So these neighbors of the 3 in a row can't be there. And that might be all we can do on this for now, because we could have gone the other way, but this 3 in a row has its neighbors eliminated already. So now let's look at this shape over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, a little big. Would there be a way to eliminate it so it would only fit 3 boxes? Like I'm thinking of if I had a dot in certain places. Here, for example, that dot would eliminate too much, leaving just 3 boxes worth within it. So you have to think differently if you do these about when you're doing an interior elimination, like a spot inside the shape's impossible, or an exterior one, because an interior one counts as a star, an exterior one doesn't as far as the shape goes. Same with lines. Something neighboring the line is different than the line. So here we got a pretty easy one though. 1, 2, 3, and a 3 in a row. So this whole cluster we can note, if I was there, eliminating those 3, it only leaves 1, 2, 3 worth. If I was there, we would have too little. If I was there, we would have too little. If I was there, we would have too little. There wouldn't quite eliminate enough. There'd be a way to pack 4 in there. So can we eliminate any more? Maybe not right away on that shape. How about this shape? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, there. That has a solo box. 1, 2, 3. Eliminate the neighbors of those. And then we know that one gets its neighbors eliminated as well. And let's see if there... I just happened to notice that would eliminate too much of this shape, leaving just 2 left and 3 with that. So what else do we have here? Well, let's return to looking briefly if we have any lines that have most of them filled, but we don't know all their info yet. Going in terms of rows, we know all the info we're going to get right now about the first 7 lines, and then we know less after that point. I'm also going to use a technique that doesn't always help, but it helps a lot more in 2-star puzzles, but oh, whoa, I didn't notice this. That's a solo spot that has to have a star. But A technique that helps more often in 2-star puzzles, but sometimes in the larger ones as well, is to try and see if a certain amount of containers or shapes fit within that certain amount of lines, meaning they would have eaten up the amount of stars the lines would have had. Or similarly, if the inverse of that. So here we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 containers that are all within 7. So that doesn't tell me all of it, but it does tell me something interesting, which is that in these bottom 7 rows, all the parts outside of these shapes only add up to 1 shape worth of stars, which is 4 stars. So this whole region plus this plus all this adds up to 4 stars. That doesn't necessarily help me right away, but I can try and look at certain deductions. It could help me with, like here, that part definitely contains one of them, because 1, 2, 3, we know there's 1 within that 3. So that contains 1 of the 4 stars, and that deduction process might not help us right away, but it's useful to look for stuff like that. We could try things the other directions too. Similarly, like here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 shapes that are the full shape is entirely within the 5 columns on the left. And then we also have 1, 2, 3 stars and a 4th star there. This actually helps us. So look, there has to be 1 there. There is 3 other ones in the left 5 columns that aren't in these shapes. Ding, 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 ding. So that means between those ones I mentioned and the 4 shapes, that uses up all the amount of stars the left 5 columns could have. So I can eliminate some stuff. I can eliminate that because that wasn't part of what I mentioned. I can eliminate that because that wasn't part of what I mentioned. Seems pretty small, but that will probably help us having those extra ones. So what else do we have cooking here? I'm looking for spots where we have a lot of info about the line, but this line, we almost have enough info, like small enough gaps that we could make deductions, but not quite. And we don't want ones with a certain gap if it already has a bunch of stars. Like we get more gaps, could still give us info if there aren't any stars yet, or a small amount of stars. But we can still get info in the other ones. Like here we know there's only 2 out of these 4, or exactly 2, have stars. That won't necessarily help us right there. So maybe I'll analyze some more shapes for a moment and see if I can get anything interesting that way. Or since the 5 technique worked over there kind of usefully, maybe I'll just quickly check if anything like that's going on from this side. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 shapes that are fully enclosed in the left 5 columns, plus 1 bonus star right there. And plus a pretty big chunk of that one and some empty space there. We know that the rest of that gap, like that, plus all this stuff, must contain 3 stars to make that add up right. But I don't think that's enough info to help us further now. So let's look back at some different shapes that have gotten some of them eliminated. This shape's gotten kind of sparse. We have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So there are sort of 5 boxes here. So I'm not sure if an elimination will work. We'll do quite enough. Here's the thing, though. If I'm here, that might work because eliminating these 2, if I had put one right here, would leave me 1, 2 that could fit there, meaning these 2 would both be filled. That would be 4 stars plus the one I was talking about. So that would make too many stars overall if I imagine it would need to have them there as well. And so it can't be that, and those 2. That doesn't really help me that much, though, because it's not near other stuff going on. Let's see what else we might be able to deduce about this. I guess this is a 3 bar that we could do a similar logic of eliminating its side. That would take too much of this stuff away, leaving only 3 squares. And let's see if we can deduce other stuff here. Now, let's look at these shapes and let's imagine how most of these plus a bonus 2 are in the left 2 columns. So the left 2 columns are going to need 8 stars, meaning that these portions of these need 6 stars. Now, I'm also mostly looking at these because the amount outside can't fit that much. That could fit up to 2 there and up to 2 there that are in these shapes, but not in the right 2 columns. And so if I had them, let's imagine some extremes. Like if these were all on the outside, there were 4 out there, that would leave 4 more in there. So I guess all we know is that there's 2 between that chunk and these chunks. So that's not quite enough to eliminate yet. Let's see. It's interesting to see where we have to go next. And like I said, I have less experience with the 4-star ones. I've only done a few of these, but I know if we think about these shapes, we'll be able to unlock some more stuff. So let's look some more at some of the shapes that have gotten kind of small. This one right here, we have 1, 2, 3, not quite fitting in 4. But let's think of if I was here, eliminating both of those does too much. It would only be able to fit 3, so that's gone. If I was here, that would also eliminate too much. And if I was here, that would eliminate too much. And are there any others? If I was here, let's see, that would leave 1, 2, 3. Would that be enough? Because it would eliminate these, and then we'd have 1. No, that wouldn't be quite enough. So those might be the eliminations that work right there. That does make this line have a good amount in it, and we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Almost enough to get info, but there's possibilities. 4 of those 5 spots have stars. So like it's really likely that that has 1, that has 1, that has 1, and that has 1, but 4 of them do. So, oh no, only 3 of them, because we already have a star in that line. So let's look at some more little shapes. This one, we already have 1, so it's harder to go further when there's already 1 in there. But what other shapes are kind of small? Let's see. We can also look at spots where things would be close to lining up with 3 in a row, sort of forming like a bullet with them and deleting the whole line. For example, if I was here, this would, if either of these spots would create 4 in a row with that, wiping out this whole thing, which makes this shape only fit 3. So it can't be either of those. There has to be at least 1 within this stretch. And what about this shape in general? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zones, kind of. We can only make 5 boxes, but I can't be there. That leaves room for only 3. And that might be the only elimination I can do currently on this. Let's see how this might help. Well, do we have any other lines that are getting sparse? Not quite. Let's try another technique, because there are more techniques. One technique that I don't know if it'll help yet, or if we need more stars on the board to help or not, but is looking down a pair of rows, or pair of columns, and imagining how many 2x2 squares could fit in that pair of lines. For example, here we have 1, 2, 3, and then I could imagine 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that is all that fits. So it actually does help here, I believe, because all that would fit within 2 lines worth is 8 stars. So 1, 2, 3. We could fit 1 in there, 2, so that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so that does mean, since we can fit them in the boxes there, that each of those must have 1. Now, that doesn't necessarily give us info yet, because we know there's 1 within those 3, 1 within those 4, 1 within those 4, and 1 within those 2, which we already knew, and we know there's 1 within those 2 now. So we're kind of stocking some of this data in our head to help, but we're not going to draw it on here. There's not really a way to mark that on here. We're just, maybe it will help to remember it's in one of those two, or there is one in one of those four, stuff like that. Since that technique did come close to showing us stuff, we want to try other spots. And I'm looking at the ones that have X's before them, so they're more distanced, because the more gaps we can have, counting being before it, or counting if they're spread apart like this, like ding ding spread apart, the more gaps we have, the more crunched the rest of the space will be, and the more likely we get info from it. Like here we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That fills them exactly. So now we have confirmation that there's one in those two, and we know there's one in those two. Now this is actually starting to help us down here, because now we know there's one in those two and one in those two. If we could keep going, we could know where the 4 in that line were possibly. Now, looking a little bit down, a little further, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We can't do it on that one because 9 means we have multiple options. What about this next one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Too many options. So it might not work on other ones, and we didn't get any drawable info from that. But when we get more squares on the board marked, we're going to come back to that technique because it'll be super helpful. So, looking at a few more of these, where can we go onward from here? Well, this shape must have at least 2 down there. This shape must have at least 1 down there. So we can only have up to 1 in that whole range. Not sure if that helps. Where are some more shapes we can look at? Leave a comment if you have any clues. I wasn't really checking those. Somebody was saying, do the scoreboards rank by timer? Now, I've tried this on a few different websites, and one of them I found did have scoreboards for all sorts of seemingly randomly generated, but maybe out of a specific database of more solvable puzzles. I'm not sure. Seemingly randomly generated ones. On the other really common site here that's like... this one, these are good ones, the top ones. I haven't tried that, but Crazy Dad is where I started on it, and I love this guy's website. And this is the one we're on right now. And then there's this other one called Puzzle Baron that I tried to beat their times, and I did. I got it to say Demotro on 3rd ever time on one of them. I had to log in, make a free account to be able to put the name there. But after I beat one and I saw, oh, if I had been logged in, I would have been the 4th or 5th place. I made an account and I tried one again, and I did get the 3rd ever time on the puzzle. I'll show you that later. And for now, what we're going to try is not speed solving. Another day we'll do speed solving 2s, 2-star ones, because that's kind of fun to see how fast I can do a 2-star one. But now we're doing 4-star, and I don't know how scoreboards work on this website. I haven't checked that out yet. Somebody said you can use this star battle in other ways. Some digits to be found by the solver are stars that can't be a king's move apart. And someone said there are many variations, I think they were saying. And it's true, there are many different versions of star puzzles that are cool that we will experiment with at different times. And oh my god, I see a really obvious one right here. This is why you got to double check stuff, because when you get little things, they make ripples out into other shapes and lines. And it's sometimes you're getting a bunch of stuff there and you kind of forget to check the ripples, because you'd have to check the ripples per shape, per row, and per column, and maybe per 2 clump for rows and columns, and maybe for the containers fitting in a certain amount of lines. There's a lot of ways to check the ripples, but here, at some point, we eliminated enough of this line that it must be these 2. So, because those were the only ones left there with any room. So how does this help us? Well, we do know there's only 1 more star in that line, 1 more star in that line, and 1 more star in that line, although that's not hugely helpful yet. Maybe with this small shape, it could be helpful to know that only 1 of those sectors has 1. let's see where else we have interesting lines and if any of those were affected. And feel free to leave a comment if you have any spots you recommend looking, although sometimes that doesn't work because sometimes you'll... Oh, I found something maybe. Sometimes it'll be delayed and I won't read the comment until I don't know which sector you're talking about. But let's see, this shape got kind of small, even though it does already have 1 star accounted for. Are there any eliminations that would stop too much of that? This would not quite. Oh, well, we can only have 1 of those. So we could go 1, 2, let's see. Yeah, this would eliminate too much because if I remove those, we have 1, 2 in the shape, and only 1 of those could be 1 due to the line. So that was a mini elimination, but like I said, they'll come in handy as they fill out the board. So, are there any other mini eliminations we can do here? Well, maybe not, because it helped to be in line with that. What about if I'm here in line with that? This would eliminate those 2 by touching, and these ones by the line, and that would leave... Oh, that would leave just enough room for the stars to fit in here, potentially. So, that's not quite going to work. Let's see. What other shapes or lines are mostly filled in? Well, I want to kind of think of this one as 2 options. Either it's 1, 2, and 2 somewhere in there, or it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and not that one. If it's not that one, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 in that specific arrangement. Then we would know it's one of these 2 we knew, so it would have to be that. 1, 2, 3, 4 would all have to be lined up there. And that would delete a lot of that shape. But these shapes are pretty big, so they're hard to navigate. The bigger shapes you kind of got to approach last. So, let's see about random comments. Thank you to all the people leaving mentions of other cool puzzles. There are so many like this. I heard a name I liked the other day, which is that some puzzlers call the general type grid puzzles. And that works pretty well, sort of encapsulates a bunch of different puzzles. And I am a fan of grid puzzles, and they will certainly show up in some episodes. And like I said, kind of similar to last grade when I did like mathematics behind Connect 4. Or this grade that's almost done, mathematics of Connect 4. Next grade, I'll probably do mathematics of Star Battle. Almost definitely. So, where can we go from here? Let me start looking again. Well, here, where are spots where we know something is? Well, okay, this might help. This shape looks too big to know about, but it helps to know that this line is pretty full, and we can only have up to 1 in there. Since we can only have up to 1 in there because of the line, the rest of it must have 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there. That's all that fits, or we'd have more than 2 in that line. So, those get eliminated, and that's going to help a lot. Now, since we only have 1 in that line, we did already know there's 1 there, so we're not quite further that direction. But we're starting to carve away at these different shapes and lines. This line, for example, we know it's 1 of those 2, but they're kind of far apart. So, what about these other spots? This shape is starting to get to a manageable size, but it's still a little big to do much about. If I was here, for example, getting all that off, there'd be room for 1, 2, 3, 4 still, so it wouldn't be quite enough to eliminate. Same with pretty much all these spots, I believe. Did our ripples help in any other direction? Let's take a look at this shape again. Could we be there? We can't be there because that would eliminate too much. That's an interior elimination, so it counts as a dot, but it eliminates so much we still couldn't have enough. So any other eliminations we can do here? Yeah, this would now be too much. That would eliminate those. We'd have 1, 2, 3 left. But that wouldn't quite be enough, because eliminating that, we could go 1, 2, 3, 4. So what worked last time here was seeing what would happen when I lined up with 3 in a way that it chopped off a bunch of a section. I want that to work here, but we don't have enough info here to make that work yet. Yeah, not quite. So where else can we look? Let's return to the box technique that can be handy, where we look at 2 by 2 boxes within a set of rows or columns. Like here we have 2 in a row, and we're going to go, we could fit 1 box, 2, 3 that contain those stars. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is just the right amount. So yes, we do know those are each one, because we can only fit that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 6, since the others, 7 and 8, were all that fit, we know there's one in those 2, we can eliminate those neighbors. So now this shape's gotten kind of small. We have 1 in those 2, 1 in those 2, 1, 1. So we actually know it's those 2 now. So now let's go further, and let's hope I didn't make a mistake. Once in a while, we hit a point where I'm like, oh my god, there's 5 stars in a line, what happened? But let's hope that didn't happen this time, because I think we're on the right track. I think we're about at least halfway solved. Now, sometimes it gets harder at a certain point near the middle, but at other times you can hit a breaking point where you have enough stars to get a lot of data wherever you look. So that worked really well looking at these 2. Let's look at some other sets of 2. Here we could fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That gives us a lot of info because it says there's 2 within that. The 2 within that means those middle ones can't be it. Now, how about here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's awesome because it gives 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what I'm doing there is, since if we can fit an amount of boxes over a realm that the boxes take up all the stars that would be in that realm and they cover the realm, we know we can assign 1 star to each box. And so we're looking for ways to make boxes where we get stuff like a single thing poking out. Now here we are a lot closer. We now have a bunch of ones that are starting to fill in. Let's take a look at this line again. Nope. How about these lines? Yeah, this line's good because look, 1, 2, 3, 4 is all we can fit. And we also can eliminate those neighbors of that. Now in this shape, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4 is all that fits in that shape. So that's gone. And what happened to this shape? That's all we can do there now. Oh, this shape got smaller. So this shape, 1, 2, 3, 4. So look at that. Since we can overlay 1, 2, it has to be those 2. And now we know there's 1 in there, 2, 3, so it's one of those 2. So here also one of those 2. Here it's also one of those 2. And here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, that we don't know yet. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I'm looking down lines for a minute to see if any of those have fully filled out. But I'm going to go back to my 2 boxes now. So 2 boxes starting from here now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, how about here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, that was where I was. How about here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That not quite getting info because there's a 9th one down there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, this one's really good. Look at this 2 going column wise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that means we can assign 1 to each of those boxes. Now, what did that eliminate here? A lot of stuff. Can we now move forward on any of these that got cut tiny? Yeah, this shape, 1, 2, 3, 4 is what fits. Now this shape, 1, 2, 3, 4, that. That's all that fits in that shape. So now, how will this help us? We have 4, 4. This one, 1, 2, 3, 4. That line needs that. How about other lines? This line's full. It has all 4. So that means that here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 is what fits. Now we have that there. Now, even for people who are watching all this and thinking you're understanding everything about it, when I make an episode about the topic, still watch that, because there will be a lot of other stuff I have to share about this. But coming over here, these 7 in a row, let us eliminate certain neighbors that you just get used to. Those are the neighbors of a 2n minus 1 strip you can eliminate. Now, what about this zone? Getting pretty small. Over here, we can only fit 1 in there. So then 2, not quite enough. Let's look at these lines again. The lines were helping a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's do the 2 clumps. Those were helping even more, perhaps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Doesn't work there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Nope. These don't work because they're too close to there. So that didn't work that way. But now let's try it this direction. We're looking at, like, for example, let's start with these 2 going this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, no, 9's too much. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that one works. So look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can now see that we have to fit 4 more in just 7 cells. And that ends up meaning we can eliminate all these middle chunks. And we need 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there is all that fits. Going up 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can do the same thing there. Going up 1 more. I forget where we're at there. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can do the same thing there. And we're getting some pretty big lines filled in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, we can eliminate the middles there. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That gives us that. Now, how about continuing? This is working really well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Not there. We've gotten too close to the wall for it to help right there. So, what else can we deduce now that we've filled in a bunch of these lines? Like this line there, 1, 2, 3, 4, not quite. These neighbors could be eliminated, but they already are. Here's 1, no, not quite. A lot of these, since the patterns are linked, sometimes I find a deduction that was already proved by a different method that was intertwined. Here we have 4 in a row already. I gotta remember to keep an eye out for when we have actually all 4 in a row already, because we can eliminate the whole line. And that makes this shape small enough to know. It can only have up to 1 in the bottom there because of these 3 in the line. And it only fits 3 others, so it needs 1 in that line. So we can remove the rest of that line. That gives us that. And we know there's 1 at the bottom, 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there. That means we eliminate those neighbors, and we know it's that. So here we're getting pretty close. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, somewhere in those clumps. Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3. We know that those are 1s, so there's only 1 in that. There's 1 down there, meaning that it's 2, 3, 4. So where do we go from here? What about this line that's getting pretty close? Well, it can't be there because eliminating those 2 makes the line too sparse. Now that makes 1, 2, 3, 4, all that fits, so that neighbor gets eliminated. And that gives us these 2 on this line. So we're sort of, I think, at the point where it all falls into place more easily due to all the info we have. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looking both directions because sometimes you want to look at rows for a minute and then at columns for the next minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 on a line. Oh no, I didn't mean that. 1, 2, 3, 4 on a line. I meant to. Oh, they were saying you messed up. There's too many in the line, but I didn't want to put it there. I wanted to put it there. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 is already filled. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we solved it. It was 41 minutes because I was chatting for a while and because I don't have much experience with the 4-star ones. But we got it. So, as you can see, there's a lot of different techniques that you end up having to use and places you want to look to see how one thing affects another. There's also a lot of variations in this. Now, imagine the 6-star monthly one. I actually solved this one on my own for fun. And I took a picture of it that I'll put in the episode of when I make one about these. Like I said, whenever I cover a concept on stream and you think you've learned a lot about it, but then I make an episode about it, still watch the episode, especially ones on my combo class channel I'm referring to, because they will take the concepts deeper. And I am going to wrap up our stream pretty soon after I read through some of the comments. And if anyone starts leaving, remember my last mention of make sure you're also tuned into my combo class channel for my main episodes, and that if you want to watch some extra math stuff, that you've checked out the new shorts and bonus videos I've put out on this channel. I'll have another bonus video coming out tomorrow on this channel as well. So, looking at some of our comments, people are chatting about psychology and various topics, and lots of also just very nice comments and stuff. Love people wishing each other and me good blessings. So thank you all for joining me on this afternoon/early evening in the combo classroom. Time for me to make some dinner, then work on some editing or writing, or try not to get too distracted by doing more star battles. But that'll probably be a little part of it too. Anyways, I'll be back again in a bonus video tomorrow and with some other content. My next combo class episode, my main ones, won't be right away, but it's going to be pretty long and pretty cinematic because the next one is the grade -2 finale. So, thank you all for being along for the combo journey on this afternoon.